Hello guys. Welcome to the story world. We are to serve you best stories, but we need your help to complete our goal of 1,000 subscribers. So find the subscribe button and please click on it. Let's jumping into story. The ocean did not care about human plans. It did not care about the calendar invites, the retreat schedules, or the well-meaning corporate emails about team synergy. It cared only about depth and hunger. When the plane struck the water, the sound was not the sharp, catastrophic explosion Hollywood promised, but a muffled, bone-deep whump, followed by the sound of tearing metal and rushing water. Inside the fuselage, the fluorescent cabin lights flickered, died, then came back in strobing bursts that made the chaos look like still frames from a nightmare. Sam, the junior marketing manager who had never seen the ocean outside of vacation postcards, was thrown sideways, her seatbelt biting into her shoulder. The smell of fuel was instant, sharp, an animal in the way it bypassed thought and went straight to the primal part of the brain that screamed fire. Somewhere, someone was shouting, "Brace!" But the voice was already swallowed by the roar of the sea claiming its prize. The wreckage floated only because so much of it was torn open, air pockets trapped between twisted panels. Sam clawed her way out into blinding daylight. The sun was merciless. Too bright, too hot, too real. Around her, debris bobbed like grotesque confetti, a seat cushion, a briefcase, a floating shoe with no foot in it. The first voice she recognized was Kevin's. "Sam, over here!" She swam toward him, the salt already burning her eyes and throat. Kevin was clinging to a piece of fuselage the size of a small car door. Claire was with him, pale and shivering, her hair plastered to her face. And then, separate from the panic, deliberate as a stone in a river, stood Mr. Alder. He was holding on to nothing. He simply floated upright, treading water in slow, methodical movements, scanning the horizon with the same measured gaze he used in boardroom meetings. Sam had worked under him for 5 years, and even in the office he had been an unreadable man. Sharp suits, precise words, eyes that could make a lie wilt before it fully formed. Now, here in the middle of the Pacific, those same eyes were surveying the wreckage like he was taking inventory. "Grab something buoyant," Alder said. His voice was calm, not just calm, steady. In the background of Kevin's wheezing panic and Claire's quiet sobs, it was almost eerie. It took hours, or maybe minutes. Time didn't behave the same way under that kind of sun. To spot the island. A faint smear of green and brown on the horizon, like a brushstroke in an otherwise endless blue canvas. The swim was hell. Claire vomited twice from swallowing seawater. Kevin's hands were raw from gripping the fuselage scrap. Sam's arms felt like they had been replaced by lead pipes, each stroke heavier than the last. Alder swam ahead, not fast, but with a rhythm that never broke. He didn't stop to rest. He didn't look back to check if the others were keeping up. He simply moved forward, and somehow that unshakable motion pulled the rest of them with him. By the time they reached the shallows, the sun was a molten coin just starting to dip toward the horizon. The sand under Sam's knees felt unreal, too soft, too warm. Like the ground might dissolve if she trusted it. She collapsed face first into it anyway, gasping, the taste of salt still coating her mouth. Kevin sprawled beside her, muttering something about never flying again. Claire curled into herself, trembling. Alder stood, shaking water from his hands, his shadow stretching over them. His shirt clung to him, torn at the shoulder, revealing lean muscle Sam had never guessed was there. She had imagined his body as the kind that grew stiff from too many hours at a desk. But now, she saw no sign of that. He scanned the tree line, the curve of the beach, the inland rise of what might have been a hill. His eyes narrowed slightly, as though he were comparing the scene to a memory. "Get up," Alder said finally. Kevin groaned. "We just swam for hours." "And you'll dehydrate in less time if you stay here," Alder replied, already walking toward the shade of the palm-lined edge. Something in his tone was not unkind, but it was also not negotiable. It was the tone of a man who had already made the decision and simply expected the rest to catch up. The jungle's edge was thick with the smell of vegetation, sweet and wet like something fermenting. Insects hummed invisibly in the green depths. The survivors followed Alder almost by instinct, as though he was the one with the map. Within minutes, he found a small clearing sheltered from wind, ringed by trees that would block the worst of the sun. Without asking, he began collecting fallen palm fronds and arranging them in an angled stack. "What are you doing?" Sam asked. "Shelter," Alder said simply. Kevin scoffed. "What, like you know how to build one?" Alder didn't answer. His hands moved with quiet certainty, stripping the leaves, weaving them in overlapping layers. By the time Kevin had finished his sentence, Alder had already constructed a crude but stable frame between two low branches. Sam watched him work, a strange unease prickling at the back of her neck. This was not improvisation, this was repetition. Night fell quickly, the air cooling with a suddenness that made Claire's teeth chatter. The sky was heavy with unfamiliar stars. The crash already felt like something that had happened in another lifetime, except for the salt still crusting their skin and the ache in their muscles. Alder coaxed a fire to life, using nothing but 2 sticks, a strip of frayed seatbelt, and dried coconut husk he'd found earlier. The flames leapt and caught as though obeying him. No one spoke much while they ate the first meager meal. A handful of strange nuts Alder claimed were safe. Kevin muttered about rescue. Claire whispered about sharks. Sam said nothing. She just watched Alder's face in the firelight, the shadows sharpening his features into something harder than she'd ever noticed in the office. And in the quiet between the snapping of the firewood, she began to wonder who exactly this man was, when there were no boardrooms, no quarterly reports, no city skyline to frame him. The fire had burned low during the night, its glow nothing more than a faint pulse in the dark. Sam woke to the sound of movement, not the rustle of leaves or the shift of wind, but the careful, deliberate steps of someone who didn't want to be heard. She opened her eyes a fraction. The jungle was still black around the edges, dawn a long way off. Alder sat by the dying fire, his back slightly hunched, speaking in a voice so low it barely disturbed the air. At first she thought he was talking to himself, then she saw it. A small, weathered handheld radio cradled in his palm, its metal dented and salt-stained. "I told you, I'm not coming back," he whispered. "The crash was my chance. Tell them I'm dead." Sam's throat tightened. The words were so casual, so certain, as if he were discussing a change of dinner plans rather than erasing himself from the world. There was a pause. She couldn't hear the other side, but there must have been one. The static between Alder's words was faint, but deliberate, like he was on a channel no ordinary emergency beacon would use. "Don't send anyone," he continued. "No, I mean it. If they find me here, I'll disappear again. And you know what that means." Another pause. Then Alder clicked something on the device, and the jungle swallowed the conversation. Sam shut her eyes before he turned, heart pounding against the sand. She heard him stir the fire, feed it with a handful of dried leaves, then settle into a long, unbroken silence. The morning came humid and heavy. Claire was still curled in the shelter, breathing softly. Kevin was at the edge of the beach, staring at the sea as if he could will a ship into existence. Alder was already moving, stripping thin vines from the tree line, coiling them neatly. His shirt sleeves were rolled, revealing forearms that looked more like a climber's than a man who typed for a living. Sam approached, trying to keep her voice steady. "Who were you talking to last night?" Alder glanced at her, but his hands didn't stop working. "Couldn't sleep," he said, "so I checked the perimeter." "Perimeter?" "Tracks," he replied. "Something big moved near the shelter yesterday. Best to keep ahead of it." Sam stared at him. "I heard you talking to someone on a radio." That got a pause, a very brief one, but she saw it, the smallest hitch in the rhythm of his fingers. Then he tied off the last coil and met her eyes. "Before Alder Tech," he said quietly, "I wasn't a businessman." "What were you?" "I removed problems for people who could afford it. Governments, corporations." His tone was calm, almost conversational. "Eventually I stopped, built the company, a way to hide in plain sight." "And the crash?" Sam asked. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. "Fate, or maybe opportunity." They didn't speak about it again that day, but Alder's shadow seemed longer after that conversation. Kevin tried to start an argument about food. Alder had rationed the fish he'd caught into strict portions, refusing to let anyone overeat. "We might not eat tomorrow if we don't stretch it," he'd said. Claire avoided looking at either of them, her energy shrinking more each day. Sam kept her eyes open, watching for any further sign of that radio. But Alder kept it hidden, or maybe he only used it when he knew no one could hear. Still, the memory of his words gnawed at her. The crash was my chance. The 4th week on the island was when the heat began to feel alive. It pressed in like an invisible hand, shoving sweat out of their pores, making every movement a slow negotiation. By now, the others had fallen into a rhythm, though rhythm was generous. Claire spent most of her time inside the shelter, her skin pale, her frame shrinking with every day she ate just enough to keep standing. Kevin busied himself with the wreckage pile, building a signal out of scrap and driftwood that Alder had pointedly ignored. Alder, as ever, moved with purpose. Every morning before sunrise, he disappeared into the jungle with his woven basket and a spear he'd made from a straight branch and a shard of metal. He returned with fish, fruit, sometimes a bundle of leaves he brewed into a bitter tea that seemed to restore his energy. Sam followed him once, careful to keep her steps quiet. She expected to find him foraging, maybe setting traps. Instead, she saw him pause in a clearing, kneel, and pull the radio from inside a sealed, waterproof pouch. This time, she could only catch fragments. Weather holding, no sight yet, not ready. She was about to step closer when he turned suddenly, scanning the trees. She ducked, heart pounding until she heard him move off. That night, Sam lay awake, the island noises pressing in. Kevin snored softly beside the dying fire. Claire's breathing was ragged. Alder sat just outside the circle of light, sharpening his spear with deliberate, slow strokes. The sound, stone on metal, was hypnotic, steady as a clock. Sam realized with a cold certainty that Alder had no intention of leaving this place. The next morning, the air changed. Alder noticed it first. He tipped his head back, eyes narrowing. "Wind shift," he murmured. "We'll have rain in 2 days." Kevin snorted. "What are you, a weatherman now?" "Look at the clouds," Alder replied. "And the birds, they're moving inland." He was right. By evening, the horizon boiled with black clouds. The storm lasted all night, turning the shelter into a dripping, swaying cocoon. Thunder rolled so close it felt like the ground was shaking. Through it all, Alder moved calmly, reinforcing the structure, checking the fire, making sure the food stayed dry. When the storm broke the next morning, the air was washed clean. And that's when they heard it, the faint hum of engines. At first, Sam thought she'd imagined it, but then Kevin bolted upright, scanning the sky. Claire stumbled out of the shelter, shielding her eyes. "There," Kevin shouted, pointing. A silver glint moved against the blue, small but growing. Sam's heart leapt. After all this time, rescue. But Alder didn't move. He stood with his arms crossed, watching the plane approach with the same expression he'd had the day they first washed ashore, measured, controlled. "Help me signal," Kevin yelled. He waved both arms, shouting, his voice cracking. Claire joined in, screaming herself hoarse. Sam turned to Alder. "We have to light something, smoke." "No," Alder said. The word landed heavier than the storm's thunder. "They'll pass," he continued. "It's better that way." Sam stared at him. "Better? For who?" "For all of us." Kevin heard and spun around. "You've lost your mind. We're stuck here because of you." Alder stepped forward, not aggressive, but immovable. "You don't understand what waits for me out there, or for anyone close to me. Out here, we're safe. Out there, we're targets." The plane droned closer, then began to arc away. Kevin ran to the wreckage pile, fumbling with a half-built signal fire. Sam hesitated. Every instinct screamed to help him, to wave her arms, to do something, but her eyes found Alder's. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't threatening. He was simply certain. The engines faded. The jungle swallowed the sound. That evening, Kevin refused to speak to either of them. Claire lay silent, eyes closed, as if retreating somewhere inside herself. Alder sat beside Sam at the fire, the shadows flickering across his face. "You stayed," he said quietly. "I didn't know what to do," she replied. "You did," Alder said. "You just don't want to admit it yet." Days turned into another week. Kevin began sleeping farther from camp. Claire grew weaker. Sam, though, found herself learning more from Alder. How to tie knots that wouldn't slip, how to move without snapping a twig, how to judge time by the sun's angle. She knew she should be angry. She knew she should hate him for letting that plane go. But part of her also knew the truth. Out here, she was becoming someone else, someone who didn't need saving. One evening, Alder handed her the spear. "Your turn," he said. She caught a fish on her first try. When she looked up, he was smiling, not the polite, professional smile of the office, but something sharper, more satisfied. And in that moment, Sam realized he had found exactly where he wanted to be. And maybe, just maybe, so had she. Thanks for listening. Hit the like button if you really like this story, and don't forget to subscribe.